We're
This
live.
week on the Rail Splitter, that's what he said. We're going to talk about some lines that are speaking to us from speeches from Lincoln.
These two great gentlemen are dedicated to a proposition, being excellent to each other. And party on, dudes!
All right, welcome to the Rail Splitter, the Abraham Lincoln podcast. I am your co-host Jeremy. With me is Nick.
Hello, how you doing, both of you?
And Mary. Mary, how's it going?
Hi, guys, and hello to the Rail Splitter Nation.
All right, we are once again live on YouTube. It took a little bit of doing, so
we just lost a viewer.
We ironed out our technical issues. I think so hopefully it'll work out better next time. So we're recording this on Tuesday, and we will put it out as we always do on Thursday. So happy Thursday to you who are listening on your mobile devices. We wanted to start today's show by talking about an interesting news story involving Abraham Lincoln that came to our attention. Kind of indirectly Abraham Lincoln, I guess, because it's more of a Civil War story this time. But Mary, we had some fun with some Civil War stuff in Canada.
Yes, we finally have a Canadian Civil War monument. It's located in Cornwall, Ontario, which is about 6 hours east of where I am in Goderich. And it's on the border with Quebec. And it's located in a historical village called Lost Villages Museums. And it was actually dedicated on the weekend of the 155th anniversary of the Battle of Antietam, which is quite fitting, actually, because one of the Canadians who fought in the Civil War was a guy named, and I'm going to butcher his name when I say this, so I apologize, but Calixa Lavallee, and he is the composer of O Canada. So it was commemorated on the weekend that he was actually wounded at Antietam. So the monument itself is the results of efforts made by this Civil War reenactment group called the Montreal Greys and Blues, who are based out of, obviously, Montreal, Quebec. And they raised $44,000 Canadian, which is around $36,000 US, to have the monument built. And the monument is basically a black obelisk with a bilingual inscription because, and I'm sure most people know this already, but Canada is a bilingual country, so we have two official languages, English and French.
No,
yes.
I did know that.
Anyway, so the inscription reads that 40,000 Canadians enlisted and fought in the American Civil War. Over 7,000 died. And on the monument, it depicts a Union soldier and a Confederate soldier shaking hands, which when I read that part, I was kind of like, oh, that's interesting. And then, yeah, I was like, oh,
That's
okay.
just like war.
Yeah, I was like, oh, okay, all right. And then, but the thing that interested me the most was that on a separate sidewall are the names of the 29 Canadians who fought in the Civil War, and they won the Medal of Honor. I had no idea about that at all because none of this is taught in school. And so I think it's great that we finally have a Civil War monument, but obviously there's been controversy over it. There was an article in the Toronto Star on August 23rd and stating that it makes a claim about what the Canadian public should commemorate because there are, Union and Confederate soldiers shaking hands. It does not mention the cause of the war. And it's commemorating all of the Canadians, 90% who fought for the Union, 10% who fought for the South.
Including the guy shaking that hand, apparently.
Yes. Yes, including that guy. So
90% of Canadians got it.
Yes, 90%
of them didn't.
10% of us apparently didn't get it. So, I mean, this is, there's been a few news stories about it, and it's making I don't know how many Canadians it's making more aware of the Civil War, but I do agree with what the writer in the Toronto Star said about it. You know, it's like we're taking an almost too neutral stance on the issue of it. And given all that's been happening with monuments recently, like it seems like, okay, can't we, you know, this is an unknown part of Canadian history. Can't we tell the truth about it, you know, or just say what happened? Because I can tell you, and like most Canadians don't know much about the Civil War. Like I can't tell you how many times, you know, I've been asked like, well, you know, why are you so interested in it and all that. But and then I've met ones who know quite a bit about it too. So, but you know, one hand, it's great we have it. On the other hand, I'm kind of like, well, it could have been maybe done a little bit differently, but you know, I don't know how to do something like that differently. It's kind of a touchy subject, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting that the issues with it are that it's too neutral, because that's not at all the issues that we're having with the monuments here.
Yeah.
They're to the opposite of neutral.
Yeah.
And too much on one side, obviously, that's promoting something. And, you know, the motivations behind it were quite different. I think the controversy here. So was it actually the Canadian government that funded it?
No, they were not involved at all in the funding of it. It was just this group, this reenactment group from Montreal that raised the money, along with this this Lost Villages Museum that raised the money for it. And like they started, I believe it was last June that they started raising the money for it. And I mean, like I said, for the most part, I'm happy we have this monument, and I hope it kind of, you know, people will go see it and it will incite discussion and maybe teach us about this part of our history that we really don't know much about.
You know, when I was reading that book earlier this year about kind of Canada's role in the Civil War, and they kind of talked a lot about how, you know, during that time period, there was a fear that the Union would invade up north. You know, there's some things that take place that kind of that led to a lot of people worry about that in Canada. Do you guys touch on it in your school system when you're talking about Canadian independence, or no?
No, we don't. Like I know for me, because I knew a little bit about it, like I wondered why we didn't touch on it. And the one thing that I've been reading a lot about in these articles about this monument is that a lot of people that are really like who study the Civil War in Canada, like there is a belief that we were partially born out of the Civil War, which to me is, I can see that, because we were scared of being taken over, I guess, you know. But yeah, it's not something that we touch upon. Like I had no idea how many Canadians fought in the Civil War. I had no idea about the Medal of Honor winners. And it's actually like when I was doing the research, like I went down this like huge rabbit hole finding out about all these notable Canadians who fought in the Civil War. And I thought, well, if it's made me do that and reading about it, hopefully it's made other people do that and reading about it. And because it's quite an interesting part of our history. And I mean, the monument looks really cool. Like it's a neat looking monument from the pictures that I've seen of it.
When
yeah.
you going?
When I have like 12 hours to devote to driving there and back.
How far is it from us, I wonder? Is it closer for us?
Oh no. It would be like 18 hours. At least.
Is it north of you?
Like northeast of me. You'd have to drive through Toronto. I think to get there. I've been there once. It's like kind of a blink and you'll miss it kind of place, I guess. Like it's not like a huge place. It's actually surprising that it's there and not, I figured if they were going to do something like that, they would have put it in Toronto where it's more accessible to more people. But
it sounds like a rail splitter meetup.
Yeah, there you go.
Cornwall, Ontario.
There you go, Cornwall, Ontario.
Okay, Cornwall,
All
Ontario.
right, we got 4 people who are watching right now. We're all going to go up there.
There you go.
Cool.
I prefer the summer
Yes,
as opposed to
yeah.
the winter.
Yeah. Oh, you
Um,
don't. No, don't come up here in the winter.
I got a beard, so I'll be all right.
Yeah, you'll be fine.
Your face will be nice and warm.
Yeah.
I kind of did some similar little touring around yesterday, kind of in a similar vein to the Civil War Monument in Canada.
You went to Loves
Obviously-
Park.
No, actually, I don't think I was in Loves Park at all. Loves Park is the town neighboring ours, and that we work for the school. I guess our school serves that town. But I had a training in Galena, Illinois, and those of you who are up on your,
All you do is go to trainings.
I-
Man, I need to be an admin. I need
feel
to
like I
go
do
to
more
more
than
trainings.
that. I feel very strongly like I do more than that. But I do go to a lot of trainings.
Debatable. Today I saw you in the
Part of the
lunchroom.
job, man. I gotta like talk to people and
You're talking to Kemp. You talk to Officer Kemp,
Yeah.
our school
Yeah.
resource officer.
So if I'm talking to the police,
Granted, you were eyeballing me, both of you, as I walked by. So
see, trained observer that one. But I had a training in Galena, Illinois, which if you're up on your Ulysses Grant,
Mhm.
there briefly in 1860, and then traveled back as a hero after the war. So it's a really, I recommend taking the jaunt over to Galena if you're ever in Illinois. I feel the drive from where we are in Rockford, Illinois, west over to Galena is like the most beautiful drive you can do in Illinois, which, doesn't sound like much, but it's actually a pretty scenic drive.
once you drive to Southern Illinois from here, you would understand.
Right. Southern Illinois, Central Illinois, the suburbs of Chicago.
Oh, God, that's the
scenic-
worst. The
Yeah.
suburbs of Chicago.
Not the most scenic drive, but from Rockford over to Galena is. But anyway, so I recommend that, obviously. But also, if you're in Galena, they do a really good job of kind of keeping the town. It's got an old town, old-timey kind of feel. And there's Grant's home, which was interestingly given to him by the members of the town. They all chipped in and bought him a mansion, which is what you did for your heroes back then,
Yep.
so apparently. So he was kind of a no-name kind of guy working in his dad's leather shop, leather tanning store in 1960 when the war broke out. And he, or in 1861 when the war broke out, he went to join back into the Army. And then obviously we know quite a lot where his path went from there. But he came back and was given that mansion. I went to the Galena/U.S. Grant Museum.
Been there.
Very cool. It
Yep.
looks,
It's a nice
I would
little
recommend
museum.
it for sure. It looks really small from the outside. It looks like a house. It's actually quite spacious inside. There's quite a lot to it. It's still, it's a small town museum, so it's not going to be too crazy. But there's a really nice few exhibits on the town itself. It was a mining city, which is what gave it its boom in the 1820s and 1830s. So there's an actual mine shaft in the back of the museum, which is really neat.
What one of the highlights, I think they would call it.
The mine would be
One of the
awesome.
highlights of the museum is you could look down the shaft.
Right. That's a low point.
But you're
Yep, I
looking
saw
at it. You are looking from a high point down.
It's on the first floor.
That
it goes
joke,
very-
that joke
yeah.
just lost us a viewer. I
Yeah.
hope you saw that.
I'm so caught up in the moment of the show that I'm not paying attention to the number of viewers.
I,
Since you're running us every 30 seconds. So
it's only the second time.
and we probably got thousands of people listening on their mobile devices at any time of the
Yeah.
day. Because
Yeah,
that's
we
what podcasts are.
we did have thousands. Now we're probably in the hundreds.
Anyway, also in the U.S. Grant Galena Museum is a boot, a single boot of Grant's. It's a left boot. The right boot is gone, and there's a nice little story.
You know the
behind it.
significance of that left boot.
Yeah, he it was
I-
a riding boot. So he rode his horse into town for a meeting, took off his boots to have the meeting, his riding boots, and gave them to a kid. And so they had the boots kind of there. There's Grant's boot. And then they lent one of the boots to a theater company that was in town performing. And the theater company left with it. So there's only one boot left. and it's in this museum. So Grant, which is pretty cool.
I would have taken the left boot.
Well, the museum has the left boot, so we now have it for posterity.
It's like that new Twix that's coming out. You can get the left Twix package or the right Twix.
Yeah, except Twix. Yeah, I guess. I mean,
Twix.
It's
We're
kind of
looking
cool
for
to be that close to a boot of Ulysses Grant's. Also in the same display case, a cigar butt of Ulysses Grant's.
Wow.
And it's one of those things like you're like, holy cow, this is like the coolest thing ever. The story behind it is he was smoking. Like the story behind it is exactly what you would think it would be. He was finished it, tossed the butt on the ground, and the kid picked it up and was like, "This is Ulysses Grant's cigar butt," and kept it. So like that. I guess that's how you would find a cigar butt. And then you're thinking, like, oh my God, this is so amazing. Then you're like, how many cigar butts did he throw on the ground? It's probably only one survived, maybe only one. I don't know, but
it killed him.
I like to think that his cigar butts just like went into the ground, and now it's just part of. It's part of us. It's part
They're
of
all over.
never thought
They're all over Shiloh battlefield. They're probably all over Shiloh.
All over.
Other cool things in that museum. There is the original, the only, whatever, that Thomas Nast painting. Shoot, I can't remember the title. I think it's like United. So it's at Appomattox, and it's showing Lincoln and Grant. Sorry, Lincoln and Grant. Grant and Lee shaking hands at Appomattox. It's actually pretty breathtaking because they're kind of in a small museum, and it's a really big painting. Probably there's, I don't know, probably 15.
Peace in Union is what it's called.
There's probably 15 or 20 figures in that painting, and they're close to life size. It takes up most of that wall, and it's got some pretty well-known figures in there. Your buddy Phil Sheridan is in the painting. There's a guy that looks just like Custer. I'm thinking it's Custer's in that painting.
Yeah, Custer was there, I think. Chamberlain's probably in that painting too.
I really should remember. There's like a little like display where you can like touch the guys, and like a little info bubble pops up. It's kind of like an older computer technology that they have on it. Sheridan for sure popped up with a little bio. And it's not that there's that famous painting where they're seated at the table and Grant's got muddy boots on. It's not that painting. They're actually standing, shaking hands. Who was that? I can't remember his name. The Native American officer who was there,
Parker.
Parker, yeah.
I think that's his name. He was the scribe. He wrote everything down.
Eli Parker.
Yeah.
Yeah. He was also from Galena, spent some time in Galena, and then ended up in the Grant administration as the Commissioner of Indian Affairs. He is featured prominently in the painting. It's really, really worth checking out. It's a pretty breathtaking piece. And Thomas Nast, obviously, he's a famous American. He ended up being a pretty influential political cartoonist. I believe his work was he started the elephant and the donkey.
Yep.
Being the symbols.
I believe.
There's also
and I didn't know he did I didn't realize he had Civil War painting,
I didn't
that he was known for until I went to this museum. And then I've seen it too. It is a beautiful piece.
There's also a fairly unique portrait of Grant that was painted at Chattanooga, I believe. But he's in full dress uniform, which is rare. And it's a very formal looking portrait. So that was cool. Some of the other things in the museum that might draw people in, there's like a hologram show thing it's okay. The acting isn't outstanding.
I remember that.
It's kind of like the idea is that it's his wife and him kind of welcoming you to the house. It's weird.
I was just listening to a podcast, and a lady on it was talking about the LBJ Museum. They did LBJ, who tells jokes.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, I was there almost exactly a year ago. The LBJ, I would recommend highly. And if you listened last week to our episode with Stephen Hannigan, he lives in Austin, and we kind of briefly mentioned the LBJ Museum in that episode. It is worth checking out. It is really cool. The best part of that museum, and I know we're getting a little off topic here, but we'll get back, I promise. They have like old, like period phones, and you can pick them up and you can hear recorded phone conversations from the Johnson White House. So there's a conversation between like Lyndon Johnson and Martin Luther King, and like you're listening to it on a period phone with the actual recording.
That's
It's
cool.
really cool. And there's also like a 7/8 or 3/4 scale Oval Office from the time, like modeled after the Johnson Oval Office. Super cool. Very similar feeling being in there to being in the cabinet room of Lincoln Museum, which is my
that's
favorite
cool.
part of the Lincoln Museum. There are not figures in the Johnson one, but it's kind of like decorated perfectly to Lincoln's offices with the cabinet in it. That's full of I called them wax, and that wasn't right. Was it latex? Latex figures
Yeah.
of his whole cabinet.
Yeah. Dr. Cornelius.
He
He let you know what was up.
He
Yeah.
gave you that jackass look, like you're a jackass, not Dr. Cornelius.
No, of course not. Yeah, I mean, of course I am.
And I know that look because he gave it to me about 15 times in our conversation.
That's why we went to YouTube, so you can see our looks.
Hey, did you grab a burger from Dirty Gertz in downtown Galena?
I don't eat meat, so.
Oh yeah, I forgot about that.
Oh.
Yeah, so no, I did not.
I went there once, and then I'm like, oh yeah, I'm gonna get this spicy burger. So the waitress comes and she's like, this is really spicy. You're gonna be able to handle it. Well, at that point, I had to get it regardless, and I'm like, yeah, I can. Oh man, the worst mistake of my life. Just sweating all over. Had to make a pit stop later in the day. Yeah. This is where Nick spirals the show.
That's right.
Yeah,
So, but anyway, downtown Galena is full of nice shops and restaurants. It's a really neat spot. There's a big statue, and I tried to post as many photos of this as I could. There's a nice statue that's called Grant Our Citizen, and that's right in Grant Park in the river. In that park, there's a bunch of cannons. Two of them are from the Civil War, but one of them was an actively used gun at Fort Sumter, which was neat, and it was given to the Confederacy by some sympathizers in England, and it was forged in Liverpool, which is why Man United is the best team in red, because Liverpool gave a gun to the Confederacy.
I don't know. I don't watch hockey.
We got a little crossing the pond is a little far for a sports reference for us here. And then I don't want to talk about my day. That was only I spent an hour, but I've been to Galena. It's a great place to spend a weekend. I was kind of doing just my training get out. I ran over just to see some sights quickly and snap some bus. One fun thing I did on the way back between Galena and Rockford is Freeport, and some of you may know the second Lincoln Douglas debate was in Freeport. I was born in Freeport, and I did the little GPS thing, standing on the site of the Lincoln Douglas debate, 1.2 miles from where I was born. So I thought that was kind of cool.
Wow, that's very cool.
Yeah. So, and it was also, that debate was, my brother was born in the same city, and he was born on the same date, same month and day as the debate. So, for a year. But anyway, they've done a nice job with commemorating the Lincoln Douglas debate in Freeport. They got some little statue there on Debate Square, they call it. It's right across from a place called Union Dairy, which is an awesome place to grab. It's like an old-timey 50s kind of feel ice cream shop. Super awesome. You should check it out. It was closed when I got there. There's also a big rock, because before they made statues and stuff, apparently they just put rock pieces. And there's a group that hauled this rock from southern Wisconsin, set it on the Debate Square, and put a plaque on it that said, "This is where the Lincoln Douglas debate were." And the sitting president of the United States, Theodore Roosevelt, came to town to say, yes, this is a monument. So he dedicated the monument, and it's just a big rock. So that's there. There's a picture of that on our Instagram, Rail Splitter Pod, with the plaque, and a plaque that says Theodore Roosevelt's name. Kind of a funny story. The plaque said, dedicated by President Roosevelt, and then President Roosevelt's son was visiting Freeport, in the late 1930s and told them they needed to fix that because there was another President Roosevelt. And so they needed to say President Theodore Roosevelt. So they had to redo the plaque because Theodore Roosevelt Jr. wanted it to specify. Less people got confused from the 1903 dedication. But,
It's a lot of history about a rock.
it is.
That's kind of
Then
cool.
I went to, in Taylor Park in Freeport, half a mile from the debate site, there's a giant Lincoln statue. Giant's probably 15 to 18 feet tall, maybe, called Lincoln the Debater, and it's super cool. So I checked that out. And took
I'm
some
just looking
pictures.
at the picture.
I also,
I'm looking at the picture on Instagram right now. It's very cool.
yeah, it's just kind of in the middle of a kind of a ballpark-ish kind of place. So there's also in Galena, I forgot to mention, the Grant Home is definitely worth a tour. Word to the wise, it's closed on Monday and Tuesday. Yesterday was Monday, so I was not able to take a tour. I've taken it in the past, though. So but you can get up and take pictures. And one really cool note about the Grant Home, there is a very nice statue of Julia Dent Grant, one of the very, very, very few statues of one First Lady specifically. When it went up, I believe it was the third statue anywhere of a First Lady. So there's a Mary Todd Lincoln in Racine, and there's a couple Eleanor Roosevelts in New York. So Springfield has one other Mary Todd Lincoln statue, but it's more of the family, and it's kind of his departure from Springfield in 1861. So anyway, Galena and Freeport, both very cool towns, kind of on the same little road trip. They're about 50 miles apart to check out a little bit of Lincoln/Grant history. Lincoln did give a speech in Galena in the balcony still exists where he gave the speech from. He gave 1856.
At the DeSoto House?
DeSoto House, that's correct.
I stayed there.
So did Abraham Lincoln.
The floor was like slanted.
It wasn't. And then Abraham Lincoln slanted. I don't know.
Probably not, but the room I was in was slanted.
So,
Like you could roll a golf ball, would go from one end to the other end.
dude, it's a wild place.
Or that could have been the dirty that
Oh,
caused the hallucination.
So, but anyway, I would highly recommend just hanging out a little bit in Freeport. We talked about on the show maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago about like going to all the debate sites. That'd be really cool.
Rail splitter meetups.
that'd be cool.
Real splitter meetups. There was one. I don't know if I can name them all. First one was in Ottawa,
Mhm.
then Freeport, Galesburg, Johnsboro, Charleston, Alton.
Alton, really?
I think so.
Yep.
And I'm
Yeah,
missing
Alton,
one,
I think, was one of them. I can't
Yeah.
think what the other one is.
Let's go.
They're all small
Quincy.
towns.
Yeah.
Ew, I don't think it's Quincy.
Oh,
But might be in that area. They're all smaller towns. Freeport and Charleston are probably the biggest. Not yet. Is it Carbondale or Charleston?
I don't know.
Might have been Carbondale. But anyway, but there are a lot of small towns. So I don't know what other cities have done, but the Lincoln and Douglas one at Freeport was put up in the 90s. It's cool. It's worth checking out.
Oh, here they are. Ottawa, Freeport, Charleston, Galesburg, Quincy, Alton.
We got them all. We did it, gang.
wow. Awesome.
Yeah, I second guess Charleston, but it is Charleston.
October 7th, Galesburg. Let's go.
That was that's Saturday. It's a little quick, a little short notice for a jaunt over to Galesburg.
Quincy, October 13th.
That's
Oh,
far away.
you'll be out of
Those are
town.
all far away. Yeah.
I
I
have
will be-
All
Saturday
right, Mary.
off.
Meet me in Quincy.
I will
Okay.
October
be-
13th.
On the 13th.
Yeah.
I'll just skip work. That's fine.
Yeah.
That's what I'm doing.
What's 20 hours in the car to go to?
It's homecoming.
I've been to
That's
Quincy.
fine.
It's like that's on the border. That's almost in Missouri.
It is.
All right. Well, that's enough probably talking about my little travel. And I can fill you in on the conference, I suppose. It was an update on school of law, riveting stuff.
Sounds
maybe-
awful.
Yeah, I like that stuff.
Is there an increase in pay? Is there a law saying that that I should get paid more.
No, yeah, there's a specific law that Nick needs a pay.
Nick needs more money.
I think we get some people behind that.
Perhaps.
Nick
So,
needs a razor.
we wanted to start the show. Obviously, we wanted to at least take a couple seconds to talk about Las Vegas and how painful that is for us, for everybody. Not to talk about, and unfortunately, it's not shocking anymore, and it really should be. But we wanted to send positive energy and positive vibes to anybody impacted by the shooting in Las Vegas. Also, Puerto Rico is going through a hard time, so we wanted to send more positive vibes southward. I feel like we do this a lot to be done.
I agree. Continue to send positive vibes to people in Florida as well as Houston area and Texas. They're still cleaning up. Puerto Rico has a long way to go. The Vegas shooting is, it's almost becoming the norm. I was showing a clip part in class the other day, and then like I had some kid, like it was just on as they were coming in, and then just kind of let it play. There was a good like guy sharing, then a powerful story about how it occurred, and like there was like a good chunk of the class, maybe like a quarter of it, kind of just on their phones talking with people. And I kind of mentioned to them, I'm like, this is like a quarter of you weren't even paying attention. It's like we've almost become desensitized to it. I think Jimmy Kimmel, I think, did a great job talking about. I don't know if you two saw that at all on social media, and I really think he did a good job. And I was thinking about Lincoln and how Lincoln would approach something like this. First of all, we've talked about this in the past, the way Lincoln handled stuff, going to visit soldiers, and kind of the stories. And, and we could talk endlessly about how Trump doesn't get it. I think you could see that if you watch the clips on him in Puerto Rico today.
Yeah, handing out, what was it, paper towels to people or something? Is that what he was doing
and just
today?
The way he talked and like basically saying, oh, this isn't a catastrophe like Katrina. I mean, that's not what you say in a moment of crisis, whether it's true or not. But to me, the gun control issue, how people are saying this isn't a time to talk about it, this is a time to talk about it because it's happened over and over and over again. And I think and based on what Lincoln and reading his stuff and preparing for the show, he was very much a common sense, logical, rational thinker. And that's how he created arguments. And I think he would be in favor of I'm not saying get rid of all guns, but definitely gun control needs to take a step forward. Yeah, and I truly believe he'd be in favor of it.
I completely agree with you, Nick.
Decision to do.
Yeah.
There is no reason to have a gun where you can mow down, 500 people from a 32nd floor. I mean, you don't need that when hunting. So, I don't know. I don't mean to get political, but I do believe Lincoln would be for gun control.
Yeah, I agree with you. He would.
I do too. And I mean, possibly to a fault. Like, I don't think being political is something to avoid, even in a professional context, because like part of my job is to keep kids safe every day. So obviously I care quite a lot about preventing things like this. In our city, in Rockford, Illinois, last night, a 3-year-old was shot in a drive-by shooting. So this is, I 100% support gun control for situations like Las Vegas, but looking at the fact that over 12,000 people die every year in this country from guns, the mass shootings are terrorist attacks that must be stopped. But there's another 11,500 people that are also going to die from gun violence, and that's a problem, obviously. And how would Lincoln, what I've kind of said, and we talked about this with the Congressman Scalise situation when we first started the show. When we look back in history at Lincoln's assassination, it's absurd to think someone could go up in a balcony, open a door, and shoot the president in the back of the head. Like, that's just mind-blowingly simple. Like, it was that easy. Like, it's almost laughable, right? Like, how often he could have been assassinated because he just walked around. And, I hope that violence like this someday becomes as like implausible to us. Like someday we will look back and think like, can you imagine there was a time when you just opened fire at a hotel room window? And for the security measures and people to be safe enough where that's like, wow, that's, you know, that would never happen now. Much like the Lincoln, essentially, no one's gonna have the ability just to walk up and shoot the president. However, they could walk up and shoot any one of us. And that's not a good situation.
Yeah.
And I also would like to bring up Lincoln's constitutional arguments about slavery. There was a lot of the founding fathers intended this, that, and whatever, and Lincoln was very much a proponent of, you know, the Constitution is a flexible document and the necessary and proper clause and whatever, like you can justify outlawing slavery and not claim that just because the founding fathers included it when they started that it should be the law forever and ever. So this idea that the Second Amendment is intent, you know, we use the Constitution as the basis for internet law. It can be flexible enough to make gun laws that are responsible for 2017. So
I want to build off something you were saying about how you hope violence becomes like this crazy, implausible idea.
Mm-hmm.
I hope that the gun control debate that we have turns into like the slavery debate, where there's such an obvious right side to it that we look back on and it's hard to fathom that we were even debating it.
Yeah.
You know,
I feel like we're that way now, you know, like I really, you know, like the arguments for it are so absurd. Like, you know, like I don't want to have to get strapped with a semi-automatic weapon, like with this crazy idea, like I'm going to protect myself. Like if every single one of those, like, do you really want 30,000 people returning fire in that situation? Like that would have killed so many more people. But anyway, I don't want to get too bogged down in this. I do want to, like, the Constitution, I think, is important. And it's also interesting in an Abraham Lincoln podcast to at least point out the Second Amendment was designed for people to defend themselves in the case of an armed rebellion. Clearly was what Abraham Lincoln's primary concern was as president, and no one needed their guns that they had stocked at home. They relied on being actual military, the militias, which were a thing, gathered together to no longer be a militia and to become a military. But like even then, the rebellion, it wasn't something we needed to defend ourselves against. The government was able to kind of, you know, do that for us. Yeah. And now they're infinitely more prepared to continue to do that for us. So we don't need these insane, you know, automatic mega clip
I think
rifles.
I think we should have any gun we want, but you can't kneel during a football game. Then you should go to jail.
Dude.
No.
That's sarcasm.
No,
Yeah,
really?
I know.
just because of sarcasm doesn't mean, like, I can say things that are offensive that I'm being sarcastic, so it's okay. So,
well, never mind. We're gonna go down the rabbit hole and get into a political discussion.
If this is your first rail splitter, we do like to talk about current events. We do like to bring Lincoln into it. Usually, we don't take quite this much time, but obviously, these are dark times. Well, we need to talk about it.
It's an important issue, and I mean, seeing it from Canada, it shakes us every single time because it becomes the front page story on all of our newspapers. And I had customers coming in today, and they said to me, is this going to stop it? Is this going to be the mass shooting that ends it? And, you know, I get asked that by them, and they're probably being rhetorical. They don't expect an answer. But, you know, I said to one guy today, I said, sadly, probably not. You know, that I don't know what else it will take, but like our hearts are all going out to all of you, like affected by it. And all we feel here when it happens is just sadness and sorrow, and just like, we want it to change as much as you do, because you're our neighbor and like an ally as well. And it was heartbreaking when I had to, the retail store I work in, we sell newspapers every day, and I had to put the newspapers out, and that's what I see on the front page is that, and it's very heartbreaking, and I hope someday that it changes. that it can be
It's
that can
definitely-
be a crazy story, you know.
It's depressing, that's for sure.
Yeah, in the Onion, and it's one of the best publications out there, and they've again reprinted their story, something along the lines of this can't be stopped, says nation where this thing ever happens. Like, we're the only place that has this, and it's an epidemic, and it's a major issue. So, moving on to that's what he said. Each of us have, and it's fairly simple and straightforward show, but we just like to talk about Abraham Lincoln. So that's kind of what we're going to do.
I got a quote that's not from Lincoln to get this ball rolling, though.
We've talked about things that aren't Lincoln enough on this Abraham Lincoln
Yeah.
podcast
Lincoln-
today.
Keep going.
Lincoln is in the quote,
Okay.
and it's by Obama, who we've compared to Lincoln and talked about a couple of. Obama's quote, 2009 Arizona State commencement speech. Abraham Lincoln and Millard Fillmore have the same title. They were both presidents of the United States, but their tenure in office and their legacy could not be more different.
Thank you, Captain Obvious.
Yeah.
So what is he saying? Like, just because you're a college grad, that doesn't mean anything to do something. That's probably where.
No. He's saying Fillmore sucked. Lincoln
Oh,
ruled.
yeah. He's saying that, but they were both presidents. It's
Yeah.
kind of like the person who graduates last.
No, I didn't even look that deep. I just
think
saw that I could use it to bash Fillmore,
Yeah,
so I
we
thought
know
I
this.
tied it in.
I think it's kind of like saying like what do you call the person that graduated last in their medical school class? Doctor. So you got to be careful sometimes. Fillmore was a president. Our current president is president. But do they share anything with Abraham Lincoln other than that title?
No.
Not really. Okay, so that's what he said. If we can get back to the topic at hand,
Yeah.
we've each taken a line that is speaking to us from Abraham Lincoln, and we're just going to chat about it because that's what we like to do from time to time on the show. So I don't want to go first, so I'm going to
Not it.
here. Mary, you're first.
I'll go first. So I didn't pick a speech.
You're a victim of the slight lag in communication over Google Chat. So
Yeah,
take it away.
So I didn't pick a speech. I ended up picking a letter. And it's the letter that Lincoln wrote to
You
Fannie
cheated.
Mae. Hey.
If this was in the group text, it was clear like, hey,
Yeah.
she's like, I'm gonna use a letter, and we were all like, okay, let's do it.
That is true.
So I
I know,
picked
I was there.
I picked a very famous letter that he wrote on in December of 1862 to Fannie McCullough, whose father William was killed in a night raid in Mississippi. And the quote I took from it is this: "You are sure to be happy again. To know this, which is certainly true, will make you some less miserable now. I have experience enough to know what I say." And the whole letter, but especially that line, is just such a wonderful example of Lincoln's empathy. And I was reading up on Fannie McCullough, and there's not much written about her. But apparently when she found out her father had been killed, she was inconsolable. And Lincoln actually was friends with her father. Her father was a clerk when he rode the circuit in Illinois. But the other thing that I find just about the quote is that Lincoln he's consoling somebody even in his own grief that he's probably still feeling from his son Willie passing away several months prior to this. And it just shows that like Lincoln gets it. He's able to console her with this beautiful letter, saying, "You are very, very sad now, but one day you'll be happy and you'll have such happy memories of your father." And I found that when I was, going through and looking at the different quotes, and believe me, I thought of picking like "Better Angels" or "With Malice Toward None," but then this hit me and I thought like, this letter gives hope, and so does the quote that I've chosen. And he does that with so many of his speeches with, "The Better Angels" or "With Malice Toward None," with "Charity for All." He's just about giving hope, and whether it's consoling a girl who's lost his father or consoling a nation who's at civil war, he's giving hope. And that's why I chose that one quote for this episode.
Well, I like that, and I think some of our best conversations about Lincoln are about him as a person. Is interesting as the policy discussions are, and the legal discussions are, and the political discussions are, like trying to get at who he was as a person. Is so much more nuanced and more interesting, and I really like how you picked out something that shows the best of him and something that we can all learn about. He is one of the highest of the human connections we can have. And I talk about it at work a lot, work and education. And sometimes it's challenging to be empathetic because we have students from a lot of different backgrounds, and sometimes it's not easy to work with teenagers. And sometimes that empathy is hard. And Lincoln is someone who had as much hate directed at him as anybody or any political figure, and yet he had so much grace and so much empathy and composure and sympathy. So I really like how you pulled that quote. It shows the better of his better angels of his nature without actually saying it, which was cool.
Yeah. Well, thank you.
My next.
I thought you could maybe give a little commentary on the quote that Mary had. I don't know if I can empathize with your apathy. How's that for vocab?
I don't know what you're saying, but I liked it. That was a good quote.
Well, thank you.
This is a lesson in feedback for those of you educators out there. Just be specific. Never mind. Well, I'm not going to get into that. But yeah,
I liked it.
I liked it too. I agree.
It was touching. I like that it wasn't, one of the more famous ones. Something kind of a little bit behind closed doors and the way out there. Something that he didn't have to do, but he took time to do. So, good representation of Lincoln.
Right. And I think that personal correspondence reveals a lot about him. This was not intended for anyone other than her and perhaps her family. So, like, you really see who he is when you read things like that.
Yeah, it just when I was reading through everything, and then that one line touched me so much, and because I realized, I'm like, oh, he gets it, because he lost his mother when he was 9, and he had, children that died as well. And just too, with everything going on in the world too, like it was like, it's hope. As so many of his speeches can give us, as with Better Angels with Malice Towards None, and even this, like, you can read them and just, even in the darkest times, you can pull hope out of them. And that's what I pulled out of this letter, was hope.
Yeah, and that's something that I do, and I know a lot of our listeners do. We just had someone post on the Facebook group, one of our biggest supporters, about when all this stuff in Vegas was going down, he wanted to read some Lincoln. And I feel the same way sometimes.
Yep.
Sometimes it's music for me. Sometimes, it's always my family, but sometimes I just want to read a little bit about Lincoln, some of Lincoln's actual words, and it's comforting.
What about rail splitting?
It's therapeutic too. I'm not gonna lie. Like,
it is.
This show is therapeutic.
This is rail split, not like the actual. Although that could be therapeutic.
Oh, I thought you meant actually splitting rails. I've never split a rail.
That could I can see that being therapeutic.
Maybe the T-shirts we make will say we split rails figuratively.
Maybe one day we should open, like, this comes on and we're just out there splitting rails.
Maybe, because we are doing a podcast, hopefully forever, on someone whose life, has been over for a long time. So, like, there's a finite amount of material.
Oh, yeah.
So at one point, we might have to resort to actually splitting rails.
The art of splitting rails.
We'll be out there with period axes.
Yeah.
Splitting actual rails.
That would be pretty awesome.
Maybe for episode 200.
That's like how we start, and then we use the wood that we split, build a fire, and then we do like the. Maybe we'll
split the rails for the railroads, not for a fire.
I know, but we got to burn it, and then we could do quotes number 2. What he said number 2.
That's what he said.
Or because we're
That's
using
what he said.
axes, we could talk about Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter.
There you go. We could
The book.
trail-
The book.
The book.
The
The
book is
not the
good.
movie. The book.
The movie's too unrealistic.
I stand by that statement. The book was a
I know.
fun mashup.
It was so
It's a great
good.
genre. The movie was just a steaming pile of garbage. It really was.
I
Mary
don't.
reads this quote about empathy and what
And then
unites
we-
us as human beings, and somehow we end up talking about the damn vampire movie again.
You made me talk more.
I did. I pressured you into saying something nice, Bull, and started making jokes. I
And
get it,
because-
man. I know you.
And
I'm trying to
because
get
Nick
That
gets to
fourth
go
viewer
next.
back.
Nick gets to read his.
I'm
Get it
next.
back. They turned
You're
it off.
next.
It's not like they're gonna be like, oh, maybe I'll turn it back. All right, you're next, Nick. What line do we have?
How many we doing? We just doing one? Is that the game plan still?
Based on time, we spent a lot of time on some other stuff for good reason. So I think based on time, just to keep it around an hour show, we'll each do one, and that way we can do another one at another
Yeah,
time.
do part
All
two.
right. Gosh. I got 4 here.
Whoa.
That's what I had too.
I
had
didn't share
four
this, guys,
just
with you. I didn't share this with you on Google Docs.
No.
I don't
Usually
think
I'm so good at
We
doing
can do
that.
more than one. I have one ready to go.
All right. I'm not going to do my Mexican-American War one. But basically, he basically says, Polk, you're a liar. I kind of asked it wrong. You know that.
I do.
I'm going to go with the Cooper Union speech from 1860. To kind of put him on the map as far as Republican nominee out in the East Coast. Probably without this speech, it would have been very hard for him to get the nomination. In the speech, he kind of lays out the case against slavery, but there's one line that I found that I kind of feel shows how Lincoln thought and how he put stuff together. All right. So, to be sure, what the robber demanded of me, my money, was my own, and I had a clear right to keep it. But it was no more my own than my vote is my own, and a threat of death to me to extort my money, and a threat of destruction to the Union to extort my vote can scarcely be distinguished in principle. So I think he's kind of addressing that fear tactic. You know, if you vote a certain way, it's going to lead to a split, and we're not going to give in to that. You know, this whole argument is just another way of you trying to take my vote from me. So it just kind of resonated with me. I think it kind of talks about stuff, constructs an argument. So that's why I chose that.
Yeah, I think there's some parallels there too with a lot of his not just his belief on slavery, but how he explained it. Because he says, like, he does a lot of, like, you can't split me. Like, my money is mine, you can't take it. My vote is mine, you can't take it.
Mm-hmm.
Then take that the next step. My freedom, my humanity, my rights are mine. You can't separate those. And that's what that word inalienable means. It's not a word we use. I don't know if it's a word anybody ever used, but that's what that means. Inalienable rights means that it is impossible to separate those rights from the person. And I think those are the parallels he's made, that separate my money, which I've earned from me. Don't separate my vote, which is my right, from me, because you can't.
Mm-hmm.
And then the next step would be, you can't separate my humanity and my freedom from me, because it is innately part of me and my condition as a human, or inalienable to me. So I think he does that quite a lot. Talks about, sometimes he uses sweat as a metaphor for hard work, that the fruits of our labor. He kind of uses that a lot. The people are basically entitled to their own sweat. They're entitled to their own fruits of their labor. They're entitled to their own money. So I think this is another well-articulated argument about slavery that he has.
Yeah, I completely agree with what you just said, Jeremy, and awesome quote, Nick. Like, it just Lincoln, like, in reading over his speeches on the weekend and just letters, like, he has a way of putting things so that the vast majority of people are going to get it. And when you mention something like money is mine, people are going to start, like, oh yeah, and they're going to start making connections with that. Like, and that's what he was incredible at doing that.
I like to contrast the Cooper, like the pre-presidential speeches are long, very nuanced, like he draws out the argument. But both inaugurals, the Gettysburg Address, like so short, to the point, still has rich language, still has metaphor, still has interesting ways to articulate a point. But it's, as I was looking for lines, I looked at the Cooper Union speech. And I'm like, man, this was very much propelled him to the nomination and put him on the map, at least nationally. So it's an extremely important speech and was very well attended and well publicized. But it's so different than any speech he made really since, because as president, his speeches were notably short and really much, much different. So I think it's a very key speech because it is one of the last long form kind of headlining type speeches, like a speech for the sake of making a speech.
I like to think it's kind of like Lincoln's lawyer speech, politician speech, like it's his lawyer brain going there into a politician speech. And and I wish somebody would do this now with like this gun control debate. He basically goes through all the founding fathers and finds all the different times that they were outspoken against slavery, basically going back to those people that say our founding fathers, were for slavery. And then he basically, what was it, like 39 out of the number. He gave prime examples of where they spoke out against the spreading of slavery. And then I kind of feel like he had his lawyer hat on, this lawyer hat when he was putting this together.
Right. Yeah, I think so. It's obviously when he's not in office, and even when he was a legislator, those speeches are different because he's not actually doing anything to make a point and persuade people. When he was the leader, when he was president, he was doing so much more, and so those actions were backed up with what he was with the speeches just kind of supported what he's doing, Emancipation Proclamation and all that work. So, but I think you make a good point about transitioning from lawyering to being a politician.
Yeah, that's a good.
So
all right, you're up, Hot Chat.
All right. I did
with Malice Towards None. You end the show with that every week.
I do, and
did you choose that one?
Very close to that, and I'm going to tell you why in a second. I'll be honest, I really wanted to pull something from the Freeport debate because I was born so close and I was just there. I'm like, oh, this is going to be cool. But that Freeport debate, you hear Newt Gingrich is really known for it, but some politicians always throw around like, I want to have a Lincoln Douglas style debate. I don't know if they really know what that is, but the Lincoln Douglas style debates were one spoke for an hour, the other spoke for an hour and a half, then the first spoke for a half hour. That's it. So hour and a half hour.
Not good TV.
Not good TV. Like, I mean, picture 90 minutes of one person talking in any other form than this podcast. And, that's not, not really 21st century debating. And it's not really the heated back and forth that people really get into. Now, that said, I think modern political debate could afford maybe increasing the 90-second. But anyway, so I didn't really see something that jumped out of me out of that debate. The big thing that came out of that was the Freeport Doctrine, which came from Douglas, and that was the big headline from that debate. And I think because it was the earlier one, it was only the second one, they were still kind of feeling each other in a way. So I didn't end up taking anything from the Freeport debate, which opened things up for me a little bit. And I did decide to take a line from my favorite speech of Lincoln.
Quincy debate.
Yes, my favorite speech from Lincoln is the Quincy debate. From the second inaugural. And it is what follows the famous Malice Toward None line. because I think a lot of people overlook it because it's from such a famous line. I think there's a lot of the first inaugural that we tend to ignore because it's not the better angels of our nature line. I think there's a lot of the Gettysburg Address that people like don't ignore but don't know well because it's not the all men are created equal and it's not the shall not perish from the earth. Like it's that middle part about sacrifice and the last true measure.
Yeah.
It's like sometimes those aren't quite as well known because the money lines are elsewhere in the speech in this 140 character world we live in. So I wanted to pick something a little bit, it is very well known, but it is after the most well-known part of the second inaugural. And I chose it because it speaks directly to me today and yesterday when I was thinking about this. And I'm just going to go with part of it that is really well known and finish it.
Man, you're building up the suspense for this.
Yeah.
Man.
And here we go.
You want a drum roll here?
No. With firmness in the right, as God gives us to see the right, let us strive on to finish the work we are in, to bind up the nation's wounds, to care for him who shall have borne the battle, and for his widow and his orphan, to do all which may achieve and cherish a just and lasting peace among ourselves and with all nations. So the pieces there, we actually are planning on dedicating a whole episode to the one line for him who shall have borne the battle and for his widow and his orphan, because what he's saying there is veterans matter, and we need to take care of veterans and their families, not just while they're active duty, but forever. I think that's extremely important that is actually specifically mentioned as part of binding up the nation's wounds, talking about reconstruction in the post-Civil War world. But that end, to do all which may achieve and cherish a just and lasting peace among ourselves. And that just and lasting peace among ourselves we have not achieved. And if this week we've got much to do, because I think that call, which starts with malice toward none, with charity for all, and ends with achieve and cherish a just and lasting peace. I think that's such a great way to tie up that last paragraph of the speech, and something that should speak directly to, because I don't feel we are doing all which may achieve and cherish a just and lasting peace. We have this hyper competitive political climate where, when we're calling each other names like snowflake, and we've got accusations of fascism and racism and everything else rising. Like, how can we get to a point where we're achieving and cherishing a lasting peace among ourselves? And the murder of 50 people, although that's obviously the most immediately obvious example, but it's just how our discourse is with regard to all types of oppression, which still exists. So I like to point to Lincoln's words and use that as a guide for myself to the extent that I can, or as God gives me to see the right. And that's another sub piece too, when it says with firmness in the right, as God gives us to see the right, that doesn't allow us to say, now's not the time to talk about this. Now's not the time to deal with that. And he says, let us strive on to finish the work we are in, which, in my last little preachy piece here, when he says finish the work we are in, he uses verbs: to bind up the nation's wounds, to care for him, to do all which may achieve. So he mentions God, he mentions the right. He does not mention thoughts, he does not mention prayers. He says to finish the work we are in, to bind up the nation's wounds, to care for him, and to do all. So I guess I use that as a call to do more than just think and pray about things, but to do what is right with firmness in the right. Done being preachy.
That was awesome.
Why are you looking at me like that?
You're the only one in the room.
I completely agree with what you
That's
said.
not ones and zeros.
That,
Thank you.
I like the quote.
That was
I'd
one of the
picked an
ones
easy
I.
one.
That was
You
one of the
guys-
ones
yeah.
I had that one as well. That was one of the ones I picked, and I picked it because it's just one of those ones that, again, like going back to what I was talking about earlier, gives hope as well. Like I know when I was at the Lincoln Memorial back in June, my friend and I, when we were in DC, we were there for 2 days, and we went to the Lincoln Memorial, like, I don't know, like 4 or 5 times. And each time we read the second inaugural. And every time I got to that last paragraph, you know, with malice toward none, and all I could think of is like, he's giving hope. And even today I can read these words and feel hope that, you know, wounds can be binded and nations can be healed, and that there will one day be like a peace, like, and his words are here for us to read and remember that.
I wish I had a positive outlook like you guys did. I think it's kind of unrealistic. A lasting peace. I believe history is cyclical, so even rising. But once those better days come, it leads us to get complacent, which leads to a crisis again. So
No, I agree with that too.
Cyclical nature. Do you feel like the cyclical nature is also kind of on an upward slant, though? Like, so like we do circle around, but we're moving forward as we. So like even though we're moving back, you know what I mean?
I get what you're saying. I think it becomes more complex, like a spiral, and not necessarily better. Because I think a lot about technology. Like it becomes more complex.
Like cue the Debbie Downer music.
Wow, and I consider
don't know
I consider myself a pessimist by nature too. Like,
I have up at this whole shooting thing and everything added on top of it just really brought me down.
yeah,
Yeah, me
I
too.
understand. Yeah, same here. And
I think I think Civil War. There's a book out there called The Four Turnings. They have like a high, which is the first turning, like growth, Industrial Revolution. Then there's like a second turning, which is awakening. A lot of reforms happen there. A third turning, which is the unraveling, a lot of harsh debates. Fourth turning, crisis. I think what we see here in the second inaugural, Lincoln's realizing the crisis is coming to an end.
Mhm.
All right, there's hope on the horizon. He's leading us into the high, which he should do. He's trying to make sure we get there with that last paragraph in that speech. Me right now, I feel like we're going into the crisis, or God, I hope we're in a crisis, to be honest. But that's why I don't have the positive 2017 view on it right now.
And I do think it's a combination of those
Yeah.
two, because like to say history is cyclical, like slavery didn't come back, right? So in progress. Now,
I understand what you're saying.
Now the wounds from slavery are still
they're
here.
open.
Yeah,
They're
very
much
much so.
open.
Right.
I guess I haven't really thought. Sorry.
So
I guess I had
the
really thought
cycle's
about the
gonna-
cycles that way, like you are. Like it's progress each step of the way. I just see it as I view it as a spiral in my head, which the history goes on to more complex things.
Is the spiral going up?
It's becoming fatter.
So like a tornado, like going out? I don't know.
No. I don't see it as 3D, I guess.
You know, Abraham Lincoln was much better at imagery and speech than we are. We're struggling a little. So yeah, and it's hard to stay optimistic or to be optimistic, but that's why I look to this kind of speech, and that kind of helps me a little bit. But I understand it is when 50 plus people die, 500 are wounded, and
well, shit, man. If we had Lincoln, maybe I feel a little bit better too about stuff. Somebody who can articulate this and give a speech like this, where it isn't about a competition. Do I look good enough or not?
And I don't want to get too crazy and too carried away with this, but we don't necessarily need an Abraham Lincoln. Like if we needed an intellectual, someone who knew what they were talking about.
I know.
Hillary Clinton would have been that person. But anyway, sorry.
Bernie.
She would have. Yeah.
Bernie.
Yeah. So it's not like there was no option of someone that knew what they were talking about, knew how to get things done, had policies that were focused on people and ideas and progress. That was an option that more people chose than did not.
We need an American Trudeau.
I was just going to say, I'll send
obviously.
Justin. Actually, one of the other ones I had picked was Better Angels, because that's one Trudeau has referenced twice now in a speech and in an interview.
And I believe that every human has better angels. That belief gets tested every day.
Oh.
Like there are better angels in all of us. I have to appeal to mine because I hear the other ones all the time. But yeah. Anyway.
Yeah, and I like I do all the time as well. Like
so. Like little voices in her head. That's true. That happens.
You call those angels?
Some of them.
I just call them Nick 2, Nick 3, Nick 4.
So, all right. Well, I enjoyed this episode. We're kind of a little loose with it this time because sometimes we're more structured, sometimes we're a little loose. But this was fun. A couple things we have coming up. Sometime in the next 3-ish weeks, we're going to have a super fun trivia extravaganza.
Oh, gosh. Not looking forward
which will be fun. We're getting some help from a friend of the show, George. He hosts the podcast called Something Something Birds. Check it out. It's like an 8-minute trivia show. Super fun. It's a music trivia podcast. I recommend it. It's a fun listen and it's quick. He started it maybe 6 months ago or so. He's going to help us out by being our trivia host coming up here. And we're also going to have some other little surprises for you. So that trivia show will be fun.
Can I bring in a to help me?
Dr. Cornelius is not available.
Actually, he is.
Wouldn't
that be awesome if I had him?
I don't know how fun that would be. Like, we lost infinity to 0. Like,
actually, that is not the correct answer because of the need to.
Yeah. The host is just like, I researched these answers, but I didn't ask Dr.
I actually had the letter in my safe at work that will disprove this.
Yeah, like you can't prove that. Actually, yes, I can. Like, did you bring those? Here you go. But anyway, so the trivia show should be fun. That's coming up. We are, is it 18 episodes in?
Yeah.
I'm glad we talked about Grant in episode 18 because,
dude, the 3 Lincolns and Washington. Did anybody ever tweet that? Do we have a win?
I will.
I don't think it did they?
If you tweet, we're going to look through that. I'll be honest, that was completely my fault. I totally forgot about that.
Well, I forgot to mention at the end of that show.
Okay.
Here.
Okay.
Right now, to win 3 Lincolns in Washington, that's $16 American. You're going to retweet the show and make sure you put at Rail Splitter Show 18.
Anybody that's retweeted between the 16th and then the week that this show is out. So anytime between when we posted 16.
So 16, 17, 18.
Right. So if you tweeted anything at Rail Splitter Pod between the 16th show but before we post the 19th show, so 16, 17, anything, we will use that or the 3 Lincolns in a Washington for any Lincoln item of your choice, right?
And we'll reveal the winner the next show.
Probably on 19 because
we'll got to draw it out of the hat.
Yeah. Neither 19 or 20. Yeah.
Probably my Blackhawks hat since hockey season's starting.
Yeah. And I'm the only Canadian that does
this
not
week in
care.
Lincoln.
This week in Lincoln, I brought this. I didn't bring it literally. I have in my office. I used to have one here, but we used them all.
Star Wars Legos.
I do have a lot of Star Wars Legos in my office, and they're cool. Kylo Ren's TIE Fighter, amazing.
I hate Kylo.
Well, he did murder a bunch of kids.
Yeah,
That's like the thing in Star
Yeah.
Wars. People just ignore that. Like Darth Vader
Yeah.
killed a bunch of children. Oh, they're still good.
Yeah,
at him.
they're like,
what? What are you talking
"Oh."
about? He murdered children.
But he let Luke live at that. It's like, oh yeah, he came full circle, totally.
I feel it. They're still good in him. Okay, there's still better angels in him. Apparently,
Yeah,
still,
like
some
one.
crimes are unforgivable. Anyway, I do have Star Wars Legos in my office. I also have Abraham Lincoln bandages. I believe Band-Aid is a term that's copyrighted by Johnson & Johnson. So these are called bandages.
Unless you want to sponsor us.
Right. They are little Band-Aids, little bandages they're very long and narrow. So they got Abraham Lincoln on them. And they come in a nice little tin case. They were a gift to me from our colleague Jen, who bought them in Galena, Illinois.
J. Jenny Star?
Yeah. Yeah. So
Oh.
they say on the side of them, these will heal your wounds.
I don't use Band-Aids. I'm a man. I let it bleed.
Sometimes we just put
And
Band-Aids
then,
on
what is
things
it?
for no reason.
Coagulate or whatever?
So I will put a picture of the Abraham Lincoln bandages on Twitter and Instagram, which means you should follow us on Twitter and Instagram. We are at RealSplitterPod. You can email us at therealsplitterpodcast@gmail.com.
I'll send you some pictures of me and Galena that I found during the show.
Also, the Facebook group is really active, which is really cool. We've got one of our listeners, John, posted some photos of Grant's childhood home, which was really cool. He also posted a photo from DC, the Capitol floor where Lincoln was in the house. Such a cool thing. I posted some Galena photos and some Freeport photos. Mary, you put some stuff out there about an interesting article you found. So please join the Facebook group. It's super fun.
Agreed. Join it. If you like what you're hearing, you should go to iTunes, rate us, and if you even feel into it, write us a review. That really helps us move up the iTunes list. We reach out to Dr. Cornelius. We go, bam, we're number one. We're a 5-star podcast, Doctor. Please come back on. You help make us a 5-star.
Yeah, he did not ask for our credentials when we asked him to come on. He was just like, sure, I will help you out because I'm a nice person.
He is super nice.
So if we have a review, we'll read it on the air. We don't have any to read this week. Hopefully next week we'll have some. Any parting thoughts, Mary or Nick?
Well, that was a really awesome episode. It was fun discussing what he said, and I think we probably got enough material for a second episode for that.
We will revisit this, I'm sure. I think we do have some extra stuff, extra lines.
Yeah.
Nick, what do you got for us?
Yeah, I'm sitting on 3 now. Maybe we'll do a bonus after show right now.
Dude, it's late, man. I gotta work in the morning.
That is true.
So
No, I want to say to everybody out there in the world, in the Rail Splitter land, especially in Vegas, Puerto Rico, Houston, Florida area that was hit. We're here. We're thinking about you. And keep trucking. There are better days coming along.
right, I agree with that. Much love and positive vibes your way. And I'm personally trying to do more than just thinking and praying within my sphere of influence to do as much as I can to help out. So the next few weeks coming up for the show. So definitely keep tuning in. We appreciate you. The best thing about this show is the listeners. And we wanted to say thank you and keep walking the world with malice toward none and with charity for all. And we will see you next week.